They found his journal clutched in his frozen hands, but the secrets inside were not about survival. According to the official ledger from the Fort Boise Trading Post, what that journal revealed would change the lives of everyone in the Sawtooth Valley, exposing a truth about the deadliest blizzard on record. But before we uncover the heartbreaking secret, you need to understand the clever invention that kept one man alive while all others perished. The wind carried the smell of snow and iron. Silas Blackwood stood on the porch of his cabin, watching the Sawtooth Peaks disappear behind a wall of gray cloud. His goal was simple: to finish stocking the last of his firewood before the storm trapped him. The obstacle was time, which was running out faster than the autumn sun was fading. If he miscalculated, if this was the long winter the old ones whispered about, he would not see the spring thaw. The year was 1878. Silas had seen 40 winters in these mountains, and he knew the signs. The squirrels had been frantic for weeks, their caches overflowing. The elk had moved down from the high country 2 weeks early. According to historical weather data compiled by the U.S. Geological Survey, long-range patterns like these often precede winters of extreme severity, a fact Silas understood in his bones. He stacked the last split logs, his breath pluming in the frigid air. The cabin, nestled in a protected basin miles from the nearest settlement of Stanley, was his fortress. He had built it to withstand anything. A voice cut through the wind. "Still playing with your strings, old man." Jedediah Stone rode up, his horse kicking up the first flurries of snow. He was half Silas's age, with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. He gestured with his chin toward the series of ropes that radiated from Silas's cabin like the spokes of a giant wheel, disappearing into the pines. "A real trapper goes to the game, Silas. He don't ask it to come to his front door." Silas just nodded, continuing his work. He didn't have the energy for foolish arguments. "Stay safe out there, Jed. This one feels different." Jed just laughed, a sharp barking sound that was quickly swallowed by the wind. "Different is where the money is. My lines run 15 miles toward the pass. That's where the prime beaver are, not these cabin rabbits you're hoping for." He spurred his horse and disappeared into the thickening snow. Silas watched him go, a knot of unease tightening in his gut. He knew the allure of the high passes. The pelts were thicker, the animals more plentiful, but distance was a debt that always came due in a blizzard. Jedediah's name was in the Fort Boise ledger right below his own, showing a large purchase of steel traps on credit. The entry, dated October 12, 1878, was a receipt for ambition. It was also, Silas feared, a receipt for a terrible risk. What he didn't know was that Jed's risk was driven by something far more powerful than greed. The storm did not arrive. It descended. By the next morning, the world was gone, replaced by a swirling vortex of white. Visibility was less than 10 feet. The wind howled with a constant, mournful voice that seemed to seep through the log walls. This was no ordinary snow squall. This was a siege. Survival expert Sergeant Frank Miller, a veteran of the Army's Winter Warfare School, later noted in a debriefing that sustained whiteout conditions lasting more than 72 hours induced severe psychological stress, leading to catastrophic decision-making in over 80% of cases. Silas was about to face a storm that would last not days, but months. For the first week, Silas followed a rigid routine. He kept the fire fed, he mended his gear, and every other day he checked his lines. He didn't step more than 3 feet from his door. Grasping a thick, polished wooden handle connected to the nearest rope, he leaned back, his boots digging into the snow. The rope, treated with bear grease to prevent freezing, slid through a simple pulley system he'd mounted to the porch frame. Slowly, like a ghost train emerging from the mist, a line of 16 wooden box traps slid toward him through the deep snow, leaving 2 perfect parallel tracks. The design was his own, born from a tragedy 20 years prior, when a blizzard had claimed his first trapping partner. He had vowed never again to be caught by distance. 2 of the cages held rabbits, their noses twitching. 1 held a plump marmot. He quickly and humanely dispatched them, reset the simple trigger mechanisms, and then walked the line back out, playing the rope through his hands until the last trap was once again in position 160 feet from his cabin. He repeated the process with his 4 other lines, each pointing in a different cardinal direction. By noon, he had 6 rabbits and 2 marmots, more than enough fresh meat for a week. The system worked. It was slow, it was limited in range, but it was safe. Anyone listening in the dark knows the deep comfort of a full larder against a storm. What would you do in that situation? Trust in a system that brought in just enough or risk it all for a bigger prize? It's a question many of us face, just with different stakes. Meanwhile, 15 miles away, Jedediah Stone was huddled in his lean-to, a crude shelter meant for short trapping trips, not for riding out the storm of the century. His distant traps were a resounding success. He had collected nearly 24 prime beaver pelts in the days before the storm hit. But now those pelts were a useless weight, and his traps were buried under 6 feet of snow, miles away. His food was running low. The wind was relentless. The choice that had seemed so clever a week ago now felt like a fatal mistake. He thought of Silas's ropes and cages, a system he had mocked as cowardly. Now it seemed like the work of a genius. The second week of the storm was a clone of the first. The snow never stopped, and the wind never ceased its assault. On day 15, Silas was pulling in his north line when the rope suddenly went slack. He felt a jolt of cold that had nothing to do with the temperature. He pulled the rope in. It was frayed, the end a wet, tangled mess. It had snapped. Somewhere out in the blinding white, 16 of his traps were disconnected, buried. His system, his perfect, safe system, was vulnerable. He could leave it. He still had 4 other lines. But the thought of leaving his own gear to be swallowed by the snow went against his nature. More than that, it felt like admitting defeat to the storm. He spent the rest of the day preparing. He would not go far. He would not take chances. He tied a safety line around his waist, anchoring the other end to the cabin's doorframe. He took his sharpest knife and a coil of pre-greased repair rope. Stepping out into the maelstrom felt like stepping into another world. The wind tore at him, trying to steal his breath. He followed the faint groove left by the rope, shuffling his feet, never lifting them, feeling his way forward into the white abyss. The 160 feet to the end of the line felt like 1,000 miles. Pay attention to this detail. That frayed rope changes everything. He found the break, his fingers numb as he worked, splicing the new rope onto the old. The work took less than 10 minutes, but when he turned back, his own tracks were already gone, erased by the drifting snow. Only the safety line, a thin strand of hope leading back into the white, kept panic at bay. He followed it back to the cabin, collapsing inside, his heart pounding. The system was repaired, but his confidence was shaken. Another week passed, then another. He marked the days with charcoal on a spare plank inside the cabin. 4 weeks, 28 days. The snow was now level with his windowsills. He had not seen the sun, the moon, or another living soul in a month. Loneliness began to chew at him in a way the cold never could. He talked to himself, narrating his actions just to hear a voice. Pulling the east line now. Feels heavy. Good sign. It was on day 33 that he heard it, a sound that did not belong. Not the wind, not the creak of the logs, but a faint rhythmic thumping against his door. He froze, listening. It came again, weaker this time. Thump. Thump. Silas grabbed his rifle, his mind racing. A bear. A wolf. He unbarred the door and pulled it open just enough to see. A figure, more snow than man, was slumped against the frame. Silas dragged the man inside and slammed the door against the storm. He pulled back the fur hood. It wasn't Jed. It was Ben Carter, a younger trapper who sometimes worked with Jed. Ben's face was a mask of frostbite and desperation, his eyes wild. Jed, he whispered, his voice a dry rasp. He went for the high line 5 days ago, never came back. The revelation landed like a physical blow. Jed wasn't just trapped. He was lost. Lost for 5 days in this. Silas knew what that meant. Ben's story came out in gasps between sips of hot broth. They had been at Jed's main cabin 5 miles from Silas's when the storm hit. Their supplies ran out. Jed, obsessed with his debt, had insisted on trying to reach his most profitable line near the pass. Ben had refused to go. Jed had called him a coward and left. Ben had waited, the food dwindling to nothing, until he couldn't wait any longer. He had made a desperate run for Silas's cabin. The only place he knew was occupied. He kept talking about a piece of paper, Ben mumbled, his strength failing. A deed for land in Oregon. Said he had to clear the debt by spring, or he'd lose it. Suddenly, Jed's arrogance wasn't arrogance anymore. It was desperation. The Fort Boise ledger had only shown the debt, not the reason for it. This changed everything. Silas was no longer just surviving for himself. He was now the keeper of another man's life, and the only witness to a friend's last, fatal gamble. The next month was a blur of shared survival. Ben slowly recovered his strength, his presence a bulwark against the crushing solitude. They fell into a routine dictated by the trap lines. Every other day they would work together, pulling in the catches, resetting the traps, and managing their growing store of smoked meat. The system, designed for one, easily supported two. The National Park Service records from that era show that solo survival incidents have a mortality rate nearly double that of incidents involving two or more people. Shared labor and morale, the reports conclude, are as critical as food and shelter. For Silas and Ben, this was a lived reality. They talked for hours, filling the empty cabin with stories. Ben spoke of Jed's wife and two small children waiting for him in Missouri, their future dependent on the success of this one trapping season. The land deed Jed had bought was for a small farm in the Willamette Valley, a place with mild winters and rich soil. It was the physical manifestation of his hope, a receipt for a dream he would never see. We've all faced moments where survival meant risking everything for the people we love. One afternoon, during a brief lull in the wind, Silas was clearing a massive drift from the south side of the cabin. His shovel struck something hard. He dug around it, revealing the curved frame of a snowshoe. It was one of Jed's. He recognized the rawhide repair on the webbing. Ben came over, and they stood in silence, looking at the half-buried object. It was less than 200 yards from the cabin. Jed had come so close. He had probably been disoriented in the whiteout, walking in circles, dying of exposure almost within earshot of safety. The hope they had secretly harbored, the faint possibility that Jed had found shelter somewhere, died in that moment. What they didn't know was that the most important clue was still out there, waiting to be found. Stay with me. The ending will change how you view the pioneers. The great blizzard of '78 finally broke on its 93rd day. One morning they awoke to an unfamiliar sensation. Silence. The wind had stopped. Silas opened the door to a world remade in white and blue. The sky was a brilliant, painful azure, and the snow lay in drifts 20 feet deep, sculpting the landscape into alien shapes. The long siege was over. After a week of letting the sun settle the snowpack, Silas and Ben made the journey to Jed's cabin. They found it just as Ben had left it, cold and silent. And on the small, crude table, held down by a rock, was Jed's journal. His last entry was written in a shaky, sprawling hand. "Storm won't break. Food gone. Ben was right. I have to try for the High Line. For Mary. For the farm." Tucked into the back of the journal was the deed. The land deed registered in Umatilla County, Oregon, a crisp official document that felt impossibly out of place in the rustic cabin. It was proof of his love and the reason for his death. They gathered Jed's pelts, the ones he had managed to trap before the storm. It was a good haul, a testament to his skill. They packed the journal and the deed with them. According to wilderness survival expert Dr. Sarah Martinez, a 25-year veteran of mountain rescue operations, recovering personal effects is a crucial part of the process. These items provide closure for families and often tell a story that the victim cannot. For Jed, his journal was his final testimony. They traveled to Fort Boise 2 weeks later. The trading post was abuzz with stories of the long winter. 12 men were confirmed dead across the territory. When Silas and Ben walked in, they were greeted as men back from the dead. At the counter, Silas laid down Jed's furs. He told the trader, Mr. Blackwood, the story. Blackwood checked his ledger. Jedediah Stone owed a considerable sum. Silas pushed the stack of pelts forward. This should cover most of it. Ben added his own small bundle of furs to the pile. Then Silas did something else. He pulled out his own savings from his pack. And this will cover the rest. Blackwood looked at the 3 piles of fur and coin, then at the 2 weathered men before him. He stamped the ledger next to Jed's name. Paid in full. The official incident report, filed with the territorial authorities, would later note the debt was settled, but it would never capture the quiet dignity of that moment. Silas sent the cleared deed and the remaining money, along with a carefully written letter, to Jed's widow in Missouri. He never received a reply. He didn't expect one. The action was the point, not the acknowledgement. Back in the Sawtooth, Ben Carter became Silas's apprentice. That summer, they didn't trap. They built. Side by side, they constructed a second set of connected trap lines radiating from Jed's old cabin, which Ben now called home. Silas taught him everything, from selecting the right wood to greasing the ropes. He passed on the knowledge that had saved him, ensuring that the hard-won lesson of that terrible winter would not be forgotten. The innovation, born of tragedy, became a legacy of community. The clever trap line had fed one man through a blizzard, but its true purpose was to ensure others would never have to face the storm alone. Share this with someone who loves stories of the outdoors. The endurance of the human spirit matters. Subscribe for more real survival stories like this.